Welcome back to the Ikko Ikki campaign Abridged. Previously we were fighting against the Amiko. We took down 2 of their armies and took 2 of their territories, vassalizing what remained. Then we fought their little neighbour, the Miura. Had to take down another couple of armies, but we managed to do it without losing our main army. So that's all done. Now we have a chance to replenish and get ready for, well, we have to decide what we're going to do next. You might remember last time I said I was thinking of going after the Yamana clan, so that's the yellow guys along the coast up here. They're allied though to the Ashikaga Shogunate, my ally, and a major faction at the other end of my little strip of territory. So because of that, declaring war on them is difficult. They used to be at war with another faction, but they've now conquered them, so we can't use that for any potential join war shenanigans. Here I am cancelling the trade deal to be a tiny bit more honourable, now they'll know I'm coming for them, and they do actually start building up troops on their border with me. In particular, they've got some Portuguese tercios. These are units that are only available to them because I think I have the sub-mod enabled that allows any faction to get Portuguese units. I figured that would be as endgame units because they're extremely powerful, but it turns out there's some relatively easy way to get them. Can't tell what building the enemy have that's giving them those things. But this could be challenging because we can't get them, and the Portuguese units are basically way better than everything else in the game. They're as good as samurai in melee, and they have extreme ranged defense, so they're very hard to kill. Making my life a bit harder is this bit of intel that comes in. It says the Mamura are planning to attack me. These guys are my vassal. They're this lilac-y faction down here that I created from the Amiko previously. So they've got 2 stacks of stuff right there. And when the game says they're going to attack me, I'm willing to believe it because any faction is probably going to attack me at any given moment. So with that in mind, I can't send most of my forces towards Yamana. I need this second army to come back and defend the other channel into our territory, picking up all these reinforcements along the way. So that will be forming our second army. We'll have 1 army down against the Mamura and 1 up against the Yamana. To actually get this Yamana thing going, I bribed the Ashikaga Shogunate into breaking their alliance. I didn't think that would actually work, but funnily enough I did get enough money to be able to convince them of this. That makes my life a lot easier. I don't have to sit here and just hope the Yamana declare war on me and don't bring the Shogunate into things. So now we can just be at war with them and get this going, and in particular, they're set up right now in front of our main force for a siege draw-out, so this is a good time to attack. There goes the war. I've also got this ninja now, and he scouts out the fact that there are reinforcements on the way. They've got another stack and a bit just over there. So we need to go in and attack that initial Yamana army, but be ready because we're almost certainly going to have to face another army right after this first engagement. You can see that while they do have 3 units of tercios between those 2 armies, it's mostly militia, so it's mostly stuff we can rout, meaning that while they have a lot of stuff here, realistically we won't have to fight most of it because they're going to run away on the battlefield. So with that, I'm happy enough to go in and get this siege draw-out going. Those Portuguese troops are the main concern, and at first I thought maybe I can rush forwards and fight just those 2 units. Annoyingly though, they were running backwards away from me towards their reinforcements, so I couldn't catch up to them, and we don't have an easy way to kill them. Anyway, only the guns really have a chance of bringing them down. So nothing came of that, and eventually the 2 armies are facing off against each other. The enemy are defending their position, but we don't really want that. They've got quite a lot of archers that we don't want to walk into, but we can get them to walk towards me. There's this old exploit in Shogun 2, where if you move a unit close to a ranged unit but just out of its range, it will keep moving forwards to try and get into range. So if you walk away at about the same speed as they're walking towards you, they'll keep walking towards you and they won't go back, whereas if you run away, they will realise you've got too far away and they'll go back to their place in the formation. So using this kind of fishing technique, you can get a few units to come forward. So here we get about half the enemy archers to go out ahead of the enemy army, and now we can face them in a skirmish where we have the advantage because our archers get to shoot first and we have our guns in front of the archers putting volleys into them as well. Plus those enemy archers are all Yumi militia with low accuracy, and we even have some bow warrior monks, the absolute opposite unit in our archer line. So basically we take them down, and then once they're dead we kind of have to do the same thing again because we took down like 4 units of archers there, but there were 3 or so more still over there. So I fished them in again. We have another skirmish. This time we have even more of an advantage and we take them out. and the enemy's army losses are going to start racking up because of this. We've already killed like a third of the troops in their army before the fight even starts, and remember, the rest of them are mostly just Yari militia units that don't want to wait around when the fighting gets started. Soon enough though, it does get started because the AI kind of detects that it has a range disadvantage and just goes for it with the charge. So now we face a melee across the line, but we've got lots of nice fights like here. Our Naginata warrior monks versus the enemy's Yari militia. We're going to absolutely annihilate them. The only places we'll have trouble are where the Portuguese troops are filtering in, because they are much better than my troops. A lot of my troops are only Yari Ashigaru and things like that who aren't very good. We don't even have samurai who are able to at least match the Portuguese. Here's an example of us getting annihilated. We've killed like a couple of the enemies, but they're absolutely decimating our unit as they face them, so this is bad news. The only upside to this situation is that when they're stuck in melee, we can shoot them, and while they have really high armor, and armor does give you an armor save against gunshots, it's just less likely to work than for bows. So guns can actually kill Portuguese troops, bows can't really at all. But it doesn't matter that much because all of the militia units rout, and the army losses there cause the Portuguese to rout even with their very high morale. And unlike in later games, routing units have no melee defense, so anything can kill a routing unit, meaning suddenly these fights turn around and our Ashigaru can start slaughtering those tercios as they run. And the result is okay. Here it is, we've got something like a 10-to-1 kill-death ratio. What we didn't do though is do a complete siege draw out. We didn't totally destroy the enemy reinforcement army. So we still have to fight the castle, and it's actually kind of annoying because previously the castle garrison was full of those militia units, but now that many of them have died, the garrison is allowed to spawn, so actually there's still almost a full stack of troops inside when we attack. I can reinforce with this invisible man right here. For some reason some of the run-in units don't load. Might be because they're supposed to be always hidden on the campaign map as an actual gameplay mechanic, so it's represented by them being kind of hidden to the player as well. Not sure what's going on, but anyway, those guys coming over from that other nearby castle gives us a load more extra bodies for that auto-resolve, meaning it can go fine. And there we go, we're into the castle. So that's phase 1 of our Yamana war done. Now we have to watch this reinforcement army and see what it does. While we wait, the Mamura thing starts happening. They declare war on us just as that intel predicted. Now they're not that strong with only one region, but because of how the AI's funding works, they do have 2 armies, meaning they'll outnumber us on that front. Handily though, they don't attack us in their first turn of the war, they're just standing there. So that gives me the chance to effectively abandon the first castle and save these 2 units, figuring they'll probably die when the enemy attacks, so let's pull them back to our army to have everything together. And that army will start moving up towards the front line. We'll just see what happens with that. Obviously the Yamana did not attack me as I thought they might. In fact, they've kind of doubled down on the defences. They're all just sitting there in their castle with some reinforcements as well. A siege draw out situation, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted them to attack me so I could get a really favourable battle against their relatively decent army and take them down. Because of that, I just waited another turn to see if they would attack me. And during the next end turn sequence, the Mamura do attack that castle on our front line with 2 stacks of mostly trash, but it's not pure trash. They do have about 1 stack's worth of regular Ashigaru as opposed to militia, and a couple of good units mixed in there as well. Obviously I just auto-resolved this fight, couldn't be bothered to do the manual one. There would be some value there to doing it because of the low replenishment in this mod. Just depleting some enemy units with a more favourable manual resolve would have helped us out there, but I didn't. However, we still got helped out by what we just saw. One of their armies went away, and the other army attacked my nearby vassal, the Irigami, and lost. So now the enemy's numbers are depleted. Therefore, when I move up my second army to hide near the Irigami castle, we now together have a decent defence against what the Mamura must have left, and suddenly things aren't looking so hard there anymore. As for the Yamana, they haven't come at us again, so I decided to now get going towards them. Don't want to attack that castle because it's probably going to be pretty difficult to take everything down, so I'm going to try and bait them outside with this old tactic. We put a half stack on the road and a full stack in ambush just in front of it to see if the army will go for the easy battle it smells and then end up in a hard battle. As for the Mamura, the army that went away comes back and attacks our vassal. Doing a siege draw out. In fact, our vassal is poorly deployed here. But We do have the chance here to participate in the battle and make this go our way. Our vassals' forces are pure trash and stand no chance, but they might wear the enemy down and die favourably, allowing us to finish this thing off and grab a win. To start with, I'm just going to commentate the battle of the AIs, because I always find these interesting, since when you have an ally you can see what orders they have by pressing spacebar, so you can see what the AI actually does in battles. Right now, well, it's not doing a very good move. Its first army is currently trying to walk into the midst of the enemy formation. Not the best idea, in fact, it's the worst idea. Meanwhile, their reinforcements are trying to walk towards their general, so they're trying to link up, but that's not going to happen because that general is just going to charge into combat, and he'll get stuck into a nice, difficult battle where his units will probably die pretty quickly. The nice thing, though, is that the AI's reinforcements realise they shouldn't go into this mess, and they get new orders to go and form up on a hill behind where the fight's happening, so that's a pretty good move. I seem to remember that playing Rome 2, you tend to see the AI just literally charges everything into the middle of your units and then targets them all onto the nearest thing to them, which causes all the blobbing and stuff. In this case, it can't form up on the hill because the enemy started moving towards the hill at the same time, and they ended up quickly forming two lines and getting into a brief fight, and this is what we like to see, because now the Mimura forces will just be depleted by this, tired out, and maybe lose an officer or something. There's an example of the AI doing a nice waypoint move. Well, you can't see it anymore. They were waypointing these Ashigaru to go set up on the flank of that melee blob on the edge of the line, ready to charge into it. Good stuff. The AI is definitely trying to do something here. Also, the Mimura are being distracted at the back there by me gradually walking towards the fight, so we're helping our ally out in that regard. But broadly speaking, our allies' troops are just straight up worse than what the enemy have, so they are going to die. But yes, a few of the enemy came over to fight with me at my line, and this is perfect because a few units can't beat us in a skirmish, although they may try, like these Onobushi. They're going to benefit from having a high armor stat, so they resist arrow fire. There's a nice example right here where we absolutely pepper them with arrows and you see a massive cloud come in, but it just doesn't do that much because a lot of the arrows go through the models and don't count because of that armor save. And that's what makes those Portuguese really strong, because that will just happen to all arrows because their armor's almost at the maximum allowed. Anyway, they have some other lesser troops out there, and I just charged out with the cav to bring them down. And eventually our barrage of arrows does take out those Onobushi as well. I had these two militia units coming in as reinforcements near where my allies were. They were kind of trailing along behind and ended up fighting units that were better. Tried to get out of there and this failed because they were fighting while running away. And being militia, they were easy to rout as well. And speaking of routing, looks like our ally is just on the verge of getting taken out at this point. I think their commander died at some point, but I also seem to remember they took out the Mimura commander, at least one of them anyway. And of course they took out a whole load of troops, and the balance bar now looks good for us. They sent one more unit to come and attack us. Well, that didn't go very well, so that's another free unit of kills right there. My two units of militia came back from routing, so I decided to run them towards the edge of the map here, mainly just as a distraction. Only one enemy unit actually ended up pursuing them. I've set up on the line the idea being that if I rout, I can rout right out of the map and not take any more losses. But actually, this one unit chasing me is a nearly dead squad of militia, so we can actually win that fight and finish them off. Meanwhile, the main fight for us is about to start, as the very diminished enemy force forms up right in front of us. Not going to be too much to this one, because we can just win with brute force with our melee line being better. You can see I wasn't being very good about counter-charging here. It's always hard to remember because in different Total War games it changes whether or not it's a good idea to charge enemies that are charging you, but in Shogun 2 I'm pretty sure it is always a good idea to give the orders at the last second and charge out so that you get a charge bonus as well as them, giving you a few extra kills. Once we're in combat it will be nice and easy to win. A lot of the enemy units already have very tired or exhausted level stamina, and while the game revels in not telling you what that actually means, it does mean quite a lot. I seem to remember. It's one of the major factors that determines combat skill, which is why it's strange the game doesn't tell you that. Basically, it gives you an enormous debuff if you have low stamina, so we can easily destroy units by just running into them and routing them off the field. Looks like right here we're doing that to these Katana Ashigaru. The enemy commander comes in, and this could be risky because their commander is just a match for mine. but not really, again because they're already on super low stamina, and the huge effect on melee attack that has means that we just don't lose men in that fight, but we can still kill them. So that's all good. Across the rest of the field, everything is routing and it's slaughter time. It seems the sacrifice of our vassals has not been in vain because we win. Our vassals will technically survive this. And now, because they also took out most of the other Mimura army, we can go on to counterattack. Considering we also sacrificed a bunch of Uragami troops fighting the Amiko, so far they've been a pretty good vassal for us, and they don't get anything in return so far, so that's a pretty cheap deal. Now we do get an ambush against the Yamana, but not the one I was going for. They sent their little group outside the castle down the road. So we ambush them and that's just an auto-resolve, we can easily wipe them out. The issue is that now they know the ambush is here. They could come out and attack me, wouldn't be the end of the world because at least then we're not fighting over the castle. But as it happens they don't, so now we just have to continue walking down the road towards them. And actually there is another small army that's now appeared outside the castle. It's another group of Portuguese troops, so they're pulling them out from somewhere, but I still haven't seen a building that looks like it would recruit them. Not really sure what that submod actually does, as usual, but I guess it lets them recruit those units from regular harbours instead of the nanban types. Although I also have one of those and it doesn't let me recruit them, but that might just be because I'm the Ikko Ikki. Basically, we're getting screwed over by this, and I do eventually decide to get rid of that submod, by the way, so we'll see these Portuguese for the last time soon enough. Right now, we are going to bring down this small squad of Portuguese, not really a squad, this small army, by doing the old siege block tactic. So our smaller army gets rid of the rest of the Yamana forces for a bit, then the bigger one takes out the Portuguese small army, and that's that. Now we can just sit and do the siege. We're in reinforcement range of each other, and either they'll sally and we'll have a field battle, or they won't and we'll have to sit here brooding and perhaps actually go for the full siege so that we don't take enormous losses trying to bring them down. Then I found a monk in the next province over and actually successfully assassinated him, so that's good stuff. It's probably already 100% Buddhist, but in the future he would have been annoying if he hung around for a while if we started trying to convert the place over. Now back to the Mimura stuff. As mentioned, we can counterattack now that they're severely weakened after their recent defeats. Here we're facing a garrison and a bit of a scrappy army that we can't see somewhere, but overall that balance bar is enough for me to say, well, I'll just take the auto-resolve. We are going to lose about a third of our troops in that battle, which is a little bit nasty because, as I keep mentioning, getting troops back is harder in this mod than it is usually. So now our army's in a weakened state, and we do need to go on to attack the Mimura again to finish the war. But before that, here's the last thing we'll look at in this part. There was a sally at that Yamana castle siege. The balance bar is even, but this could be a little bit misleading because our force is quite heavily split. It's in a sort of 1/3, 2/3 setup, meaning while we're going to have an easy chance to surround the enemy, we need to be careful here to actually get everything fighting at the same time, otherwise each group will have a local disadvantage. The worst case scenario would be them just rushing my initial deployment zone to fight my rubbishy army over there. Luckily that doesn't happen. They turn their army to face my reinforcements. So now they're going to attack towards my reinforcements, and that's the second worst option, so that's something. We need to get our smaller army to rush in behind the enemy while the reinforcement group just kind of holds on. You can see they have us severely outflanked here. They're going to be sending cav onto both sides of this reinforcement group. Luckily we're right by the line, so our rear flank is secure. Still, I need to send spear units to each flank to deal with the cav, and that leaves me very lacking for melee units because a lot of the melee units that were in this army are currently in the second army. They're kind of set up in a not particularly efficient way. That second army is wasting strength. So we have one rank of troops defending the front of our army, and there are plenty of gaps, like right here where the enemy's heavy cav slam into our archer line. Nasty stuff. Now we are going to have issues because some of the assaulting enemy infantry are the Portuguese, and they are going to make short work of everything they touch. Even these Yari retainers are going to die to the last man as the Portuguese come in, and we're inflicting very little damage back on them just because they have really high stats. As I said, they're kind of a post-game unit in terms of their balancing. They're extremely good and don't cost very much to upkeep. At the left end of the line we did stop the enemy's cavalry and some infantry that were outflanking us, so that's nice. And elsewhere in the centre there are some better fights going on, like right here where our warrior monks will bring down the enemy's militia troops even though we only have one rank. One rank's enough in that situation. Really what's happening in this battle is defined by where our smaller army is at the moment, and they're almost arriving at the battle. The enemy did throw some more generals back our way from their 5 or 6 generals that they had, and that held us up because we had to stop to fight them. They were all good fights where our spears were fighting their heavy cav, but it's just delaying us arriving to the back of the enemy's main line and helping out. Our general is getting stuck in with the main fight in the centre, taking out some katana ashigaru, but the left side of our army in particular is in big trouble because our melee units just died. All of those Yari samurai are already gone, so the Portuguese are now hacking into our archer line. On the right things are looking better. Looks like my warrior monks are doing okay against the enemy's veteran ashigaru and a general right there. We do have a bonus against the general on the warrior monks as well, plus I had guns shooting into that fight. Really, we're just trying to grab enough army losses here to get rid of these Portuguese units as they gradually hack through my archers, who are at this stage just going to have to be sacrificed to buy time. It'll take a while for the enemy to kill them, and in the meantime we are killing other things elsewhere. Here's an example of me using bow warrior monks against the tercios, and more importantly an example of how that doesn't do anything. You can see the arrows just shoot into the models and it has no effect. They kind of phase through them. I think I did see one enemy go down to these archer attacks here, but basically their nearly maxed out armor stat means they're sort of invulnerable to ranged fire. I used to think that armor didn't protect you against gun attacks, but they added a unit into the game that was called Bulletproof Samurai or something, and it just had really high armor just like the tercios. So I think that armor can also deflect gun attacks, it's just less likely to do it. What the chances are is another thing that's just all unknown. Anyway, things are going well at the back. We have taken out pretty much everything now that's not the tercios, so the enemy's army losses will build up. Here's an example of the guns firing at the Portuguese, and here we do more reliably see a few enemies going down. We can chip away at them by shooting at point blank range while everything else acts as a sacrifice. Here was one unit that kind of held up a lot of our second army on its own, but we did start to inflict damage on them once they got tired of killing us and lost a bunch of stamina. So yes, sheer attrition there gets us a little bit of damage, and finally we grab the rout. That's what we really need. Now things will turn around. We slaughter a few, I end the battle as soon as possible, and that's that. A decisive victory, but one where we did take quite a lot of damage. We lost a couple of full units there, which is nasty. Going to be pretty difficult to get them back, especially out here where we don't have the buildings readily available. However, the enemy army was also trashed. They now have virtually nothing left in the siege, so to finish this little bit off, here's the auto-resolve where I took them out for good. So we're into the castle. Our losses have been quite great fighting the Yamana so far. We're not really in a good situation. We probably couldn't fight another full stack army like the one we just saw. But the really good news is there isn't another one. The Yamana don't have any troops left. They are only a small faction, so we've now dealt with all of them. They have one more region to the east here, and it's just got one unit in it. So with that, both the Yamana War and the Mamura War look like they're going to be okay in the end, and at this stage I will end this part and we'll come back to finish those wars off at the start of the next part and get immediately into a much more difficult war.